First of all, thank you for coming out on such a beautiful day. I know everyone would rather be outside, but we appreciate you coming in for this initial community meeting discussing the middle school and our new middle school project. We look forward to a lot of input from you. We will do our best to answer questions, and we really appreciate you being a part of this process as we evaluate the construction of a new middle school. So I'm Jim Richards. I'm the president of the board, and this is the last that you will hear from me tonight. I will pass it over to Superintendent Murphy to carry on.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I'll repeat what Jim said a bit, and that's to thank you for coming out tonight. We really appreciate it. This is our first really formal presentation to you. We've had several different forums. We had 2 last spring, and they basically were just walkthroughs. We had a chance to tour the facility. We had teachers here, brought us all around the school so that you could, the folks that attended from the community could have a chance to see that. We did that on a couple of Saturdays, and we found that to be helpful. We also did 2 more forums this winter around the topic of grade configuration. What would, if we were going to move forward, what grades would we have? There was a lot of deliberation. We heard from families. They shared what they thought was an appropriate grade configuration as we began to think about what that building might look like, and the board moved forward to identify it as a 6 through 8. The other side of that was a 5 through 8, but they felt pretty strongly that they wanted to stay with the current grade configuration that we currently have here at Runland. So we've had these opportunities to come together. They're really valuable. Before we begin, I'd like to do just some brief introductions, and I don't want to forget anybody, but with us tonight, just so you know, our school board, and they're kind of spread all over the place, but Pam Walsh is here. Pam, just raise your hand. Bob Cotton, Bob's down here. Jonathan Weinberg is back there. And just sitting in front of Jonathan is Brenda Hastings. You had a chance to meet Jim. I think Gina Cannon is here. Gina's back there. Did I miss anybody?
Dave.
This David Parker. And just talked to David too. How could I miss that, Dave? Easy. And so they've joined us tonight for this presentation. The staff that's been working on the project in collaboration with the board, and some of the folks that are consultants. Joining us tonight is Jack Dunn, our business administrator. Jack's way back at the table with the board. Matt Cashman, our director for school facilities, is here. Matt's up front. Principal of Runland Middle School, Paulette Fitzgerald, is sitting here with us.
Welcome, everybody.
We also have folks from our consultants that are helping us with looking at the project, thinking about what that might look like. Tina Stanslowski and Pauline Miller are both here from our consultants, HMFH. Architects and engineers, so that helps us. In addition, we also have folks from RFS, which is RISC, Frost, and Shumway. They help us with different aspects of the engineering, as well as Novus, that's helping us with some work in terms of the site. We're going to wait for some folks to get settled. So anyway, those are folks that are here, and they can help us tonight, because many of them have been working on the project, so there may be questions at the end that we would, we'll have a time for you to ask some questions. So just briefly, just really quickly, because I want to get through these some slides and then open it up to questions and answers. We think that's the best way to hear from you. We don't want to have you sit here and just listen to us pontificate on all these slides. So we'll get through those quickly. But just briefly, this whole process for the district and the school district of Concord started in 2017 when they held a number of charrettes, and people came in, stakeholders across the town, the city, came in and shared their ideas. What kinds of things do we want for middle school? What do we want it to look like? How do we want to provide services to youngsters? And they spent a number of meetings doing charrettes and coming up with ideas about what that school should look like. And as you know, that charrette gave everyone an opportunity to design and help to plan. Unfortunately, things happened. Life goes on. The project got put on hold, and we dealt with 2 years of a pandemic. Everything got put on hold. But the board determined to take a closer look at this school and the environment that we have for our adolescent students, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. They decided to move forward with the project and to begin to have more deliberations and study the needs of what our students would require in an effective environment for middle school education. So let me start with some slides, just quickly what our vision is for the school. And we wanted a facility that functions as a learning environment for our students, supporting their intellectual, their physical, their social and emotional needs as they become members of the community. And our mission is, in this whole project, the mission is to create an environment that will support the needs of students in grades 6 through 8. And honestly, this is their way to prepare for their high school experience. So that's what we envision for our students and for the school, and what our mission will be as we pursue this. So what is a middle school? What is that? What makes that different? And what are the goals of middle school education? And obviously, it's aligned with good practices for middle school. It's different than an elementary school. One teacher, 20, 25 students in a classroom. It's very different. Now they're exposed to a lot of different experiences, a lot of hands-on experiences, and we know that, and those of you that have experiences with adolescent age students, you know that they're not like elementary youngsters and they're not like high school. So it's a very challenging time in their life, and so their environment needs to support that. All developmentally appropriate, and I think even for lessons and activities, we know that in middle school, I was a middle school principal, that you need to change up their experiences. They need to be active learners. They need to be moving around. They need to have hands-on experiences. They need larger areas to work within. And so we, as we look at preparing a design, we want to keep those very important developmental aspects of adolescence in mind when we do this work. One of the other things about middle schoolers, and we work really hard about, is giving them opportunities to work together. Teaming is very important. Collaborating with each other and with their teachers is also an important aspect. And begin the early stages of self-directed learning, that they become slowly, starting in 6th grade, that they become self-directed learners, that they can leave their classroom and they can move to the library, they can go to a science lab, they can go to a STEM area and do their activities because as we work with them for them to become self-directed. Obviously, strong communication skills are really also very important for our students. And understanding the world around them, understanding the social aspects, and working with each other. And that helps to prepare them for high school. You know, in Concord, they leave the school that we're looking at will hold approximately 900 students. Just think about it, when they go to Concord High School, the enrollment is around 1,500, and when all of the youngsters that are there for the Career and Technical Center, you're close to 2,000 students. So we want to prepare them for that experience also, and having a school environment will help us do that. So, Matt, I think Matt's going to tell us about why we need a new school.
That's a question that always comes up. Why do we need a new middle school? Brumlett is 65 years old. So just think of the usage it gets year-round and the amount of kids. We have about 863 students in here now, but it's used on nights and weekends. So over 65 years, it's a lot of wear and tear. We'll talk a little bit about the mechanical systems, the electrical, the plumbing, the fire suppression, code-related site characteristics that are in need of replacement or repair. What we did, if you want to, what we did is a picture often tells 1,000 words. So wanted to take a look at the envelope, the existing conditions, a couple of pictures of our mechanical room, the outer exterior shell. A lot of our windows are wood frame, single pane. A lot of the double pane windows are starting, the seals have broken, there's condensate, there's heat loss. We have some outside brick veneer that's chipping away. One of the big things I always talk about is roofs. We have roof leaks all over, and trying to chase them and find them are very difficult. So you walk down any hallway in a lot of classrooms, you'll see missing or ceiling tiles that need to be replaced. We continually are chasing roof leaks, and it becomes an issue. We have pictures of cracked skylights that those two come in. I did want to call your attention to the one picture on the bottom of the screen. That's a unit heater that's in the roof, and something that happened over this winter is we had a leak on it, so naturally we need to repair the leak. But we couldn't do it right away because we needed an asbestos abatement company to come in, remove it all, isolate it, and then days later, with a simple plumbing repair, took several $1,000s just to get that completed, to deliver heat back to that hallway. There's another picture of a air conditioner, a window air conditioner. We have 16 classrooms upstairs for the 8th grade. We only have enough power to supply 8 of the air conditioners. So what we've had to do is double up and share rooms and open doors before school. It's just a tough situation. I wanted to call some attention here. You see the doorways in many of the areas open into the hallways, and oftentimes in the passing of classes that can be pretty dangerous with kids not seeing them fly open. They lock from the outside, so there's new styles of locks for security reasons that we would be looking at to swap over. So I'm not going to take a whole lot of time. I just want to tell you that the school is tired. It gets a lot of use. And here's two of we've got a science classroom you can see on the lower part, and then the larger one is our wood shop. Again, think back, they've been in use for 65 years, lots of people. And so RFS Engineering are here tonight, and along with partnership with HOH Architects, they did a sort of an existing conditions grid assessment. And this is in your handout too. But many of the issues on this list are either poor, but mainly deficient, poor, and I should say fair condition. So as we talk about the school, I think the school will explain to itself. We're going to have many more meetings and tours to take a look at it, but I think this will give you a good picture of the condition and the status that the school is in. And I think with that, I will hand it over to Paulette Fitzgerald, the principal.
Thanks, Matt. So you ask a middle school principal to talk about a middle school, I could go on, but I know that I have a finite amount of time. The superintendent will tell me if I'm going on too long. So again, thank you all for coming. When we think about a middle school, as our superintendent has said, we think about the unique needs of this age level. They bring their challenges for sure, but those of us who are here love working with this age group. And so as we've been going through this whole process, it's been interesting to look at, okay, what are our big ideas, our best practices? Safety and security. Can we do this currently here? And what would a new building give us? And so I was actually working on this weekend and thinking, okay, the big thing in a school of currently 863 kids, is how do we make a big school small so kids are in their neighborhood, their cluster? We can't do that now because Rundlet has a lot of long hallways, so that's something that we can't do. Our classroom sizes, according to the state regs, a classroom size should be about 900 square feet. We have classrooms that are about 700 square feet. And if, I know Matt referenced our 8th grade wing up there, really small classrooms, and the kids get bigger. You know, we have kids who are 6 feet tall in these little tiny rooms, and it gets really hard to it's just not a good learning environment for them.
I just flipped to the other
Oh.
side so you can tell them how many.
Oh, yes, thank you. So all the areas in orange are the areas that are undersized, not optimal learning spaces. Our gym, which is down here, is not large enough for us to have a full school assembly. We don't have anywhere that we can have our whole student body come together for pep rallies or anything like that. And this is the 8th grade area with very small classrooms, and Matt just spoke to the air conditioning and the difficulties in the months of like September, May, June. It gets so hot up there. So again, not good learning environments. And then these are other classrooms that are undersized. I think a typical, or the code or guidelines, thank you, I always say, I'm learning all new words from our architect friends. For a science classroom is 1,200 square feet. Some of our science classes are there, but we have others that are not. And they're not really science classrooms, so they don't have labs. They can't get the kids into the hands-on science experiences that we would want them to do. Let's see, optimal classroom sizes, team cluster work, I think I covered those. Oh, then we talk about security. If you walk in our main entrance, there's not a good sight line. Once people walk in, right there, yep, you can't see where they go. That's a huge security issue for us, and something that we worry about all the time. I think the other thing too is some of our wooden doors don't close if it's too humid. So if we need to go into a lockdown, that's a problem too. Can you go back to the other?
Not the chart.
Yeah, the chart. I think you'll hear a little later about building materials that are safe for student, staff, and for the environment. And Matt already spoke to the heating issue where we had to do the asbestos abatement. So these are all things that we're always thinking about and trying to find workarounds. And then infrastructure that supports technology. We are so lucky that our kids have Chromebooks. We are one-to-one here at Rundlet. But Chromebooks need to be charged. And if you go into just about any classroom, there aren't enough outlets to support a classroom need for charging. So things like that people might not think about as a need for a school. This speaks to the teaming that I was just talking about, and I think we have slides later on where you can see like optimal teaming. So right now we have, this is cluster 6-1 is kind of the lucky cluster because they are in more of a typical team layout, which is what we would really like to have for all of our clusters, except they don't really have a good science room. But you know, they're the lucky ones. Over here, also not too bad. Then you look at the other 6th grade cluster, they're spread out. 7th grade is kind of all over the place. 8th grade is in a long formation too. So what we really want, and you'll see in other slides, is we really want a neighborhood feel for our kids. That's how we make a large school feel small, by having these neighborhoods for them. And then it also cuts down on the long hallways and the travel time. So that's, I think, what I have to say. I think I think you
It's
are
my turn.
next.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we've been also talking about sustainability and resilience in this project. When we talk about those two things, we talk about it more holistically. Everybody thinks of energy when they hear the word sustainability, but we also like to take in other topics. So we talk about health and well-being. One thing that'll be important in the new school is to have, all of the learning spaces have access to daylight and views. When you have natural light coming into your classroom, you learn much better than if you're in a dark room where you're not connected to nature. One of the things that Paulette was talking about is healthy materials. So we're looking to get as many materials in the building as possible that are red list free. So the red list is, a list that gets updated every year of all these chemicals of concern that are bad for us. Some of the big ones are, you may have heard on the news, PFAS, antimicrobials, and then also fire retardants on materials. So it would be a goal to get more healthy materials on everything that the students and teachers can touch in the building. Another goal is to reduce water use in the building, and also, we talk about a comprehensive composting program. So that's something that is starting up in a lot of schools around the U.S. We can, reduce our waste from the school by doing composting. Some of the other things about water use reduction, we can do rainwater harvesting. So we can have, big tanks underground that capture the rainwater and then get used for toilet flushing. They could also get used for irrigations of sports fields or outdoor space. And then energy is the one that most often we talk about on sustainability. The district is thinking about no on-site combustion and getting the building to maybe even a net positive energy on-site. So you hear a lot about net zero. This is taking it one step further so that you could maybe potentially sell back energy to the grid. So there's lots of different ways we can do that in the all-electrical HVAC systems. We have our engineers here tonight, RFS, so we can answer questions about this after. I'm just going to touch on a few things. There's ways that we can use batteries for backup, so maybe instead of the emergency generator, we can have a battery backup system in the building. And then if we wanted to, we could also buy renewable energy credits. And then the last thing that we want to touch on is carbon. And so we would be measuring embodied carbon at every phase of the design and trying to reduce that in our materials that we're using. And also be looking at ways to sort of just reduce the amount of carbon that provides, or causes the global warming. So we look at every material and we say, does that contribute to global warming? And if it does, can we use something else? I'm going to turn it over to Kathleen or Jack.
Okay. There's been some discussion around developing a partnership with the Y. I think I said my initial comments, we're just in the beginning stages here. We're just initially starting this project. With us tonight is Michelle Shepard from the Y. She's the new CEO for the Y program at the Granite State Y, and the Concord Y is a part of that. Concord has been the Concord Y has been the partner of the Concord School District for a number of years, providing activities for our students before and after school. And we have developed a letter of intent with the Y, and all that means is that we talk to them about what it might look like. We have no other, we're not any further than that in terms of our relationship with them. But what kind of partnership would we build with them? And so I just wanted to kind of highlight, obviously, community partners are really important. The Y isn't the only community partner. We are have a close working relationship with the Boys and Girls Club. We have a lot of agencies in the community that we work very closely with, so this is not unusual. And again, I mentioned that they provide extensions of the day for our students in our district. We also see this as a wonderful way to integrate families with students using both our school site as well as the possibility of the Y. And we know that there could be some shared spaces should this partnership become a reality. And that would be things like gymnasium, a pool. One of the things that we know is that one of the leading causes of death in our middle school age kids is drowning. It would be wonderful if the kids had a chance to have that as part of their physical education program. But it's just an idea of how that relationship might build out. You can also use other facilities, both at the Y as well as in the middle school, would be things like the kitchen, multi-purpose rooms, as well as classroom space. So again, I want to be very clear, this is really a letter, we have a letter of intent only to talk and think about what it could be. We haven't got any further than that. Michelle, do you have anything that you'd like to share with the group?
We're just honored to be considered further than our partnership that already exists. So our YMCA is a branch association, and the Concord Y merged into the Granite Association in June of 2021. And we did that to really help support an independent branch, which is a model that happens across the country, typically. The cool thing about this project is it's modeled after some consideration of other school and middle school and YMCA collaborations that have kind of looked at how we can serve the community together, mutually in saving expenses on buildings and efficiency of scale, but then thinking about how we can wrap around the community in a more holistic way, through learning, through social emotional learning as well, and also through healthy initiatives. And we know that the Y has been we've been in this country a long time. 1844, we started out as an organization. In New Hampshire, we started out in 1852. So we have really served our communities well in partnerships with other entities that serve the community, like our education system. So we're just honored to be exploring the collaboration further, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those as well too.
Okay. I'm going to address the two topics. One is land, and the other is the financial impact, very preliminary. So when we started looking at land, going back to about 4 years ago, we wanted to find a place that was suitable enough for any 900 to a 1,200 student school at the time. The board has chosen to move forward with a 6 through 8 program. So right now the building will be spec'd out for a 900 student school. We wanted it to be within the city limits, and it would be close to the other schools, easily accessible for students, staff, and the community, hopefully within walking distance. Locate a property that would be on safe routes to school, and secure the property that have more field space than what we have now. And also be able to provide the updated utilities as it relates to water and sewer services from the city, and also try to minimize the impact that there would be on taxable property. We already know about 72–74% of Concord is the property is taxable. It's the lowest in the state, and we did not want to impact that. If anything, we're hoping to make a net positive. It was also asked about other sites that we explored, and publicly I'll talk about 6 of them. I've talked with each of those owners and made them aware that I would be discussing these in public. It's easy. I did talk to myself on these 3. Yes, I did, as well as the board, which are owned by the Concord School District. One of which you're standing on now is the existing site, and all planning up until the recent events of Center Point Church have been planned to be on this site. The other one is the 59 acres that's behind broken ground that the district has owned since the 80s, and that was planned for a second high school or a second middle school at the time. And at the time of that neighborhood was not there at the time this properties were purchased. The other one is across from Clinton Street, 150 Clinton Street, which is White Farm and Project C. There's 27 acres back there. The other one was Monitor Drive, which was the Concord Monitor. That has 79 acres behind that building. The other one is the Steeplegate Mall. That's about 50 acres. And the 6th one was Langdon Ave, which is where EVO Rock is, where the Concord Steam was supposed to go. That has 34 acres. So these are other properties that we had looked at that we'll publicly discuss. The other ones were us looking at public records and deciding, based on what we've seen, some other information available online, but we did not contact those owners, so we're not publicly talking about those. And if this site does not come to fruition, we will be back to this site, or will there be other options? Okay. Just to give you an aerial view as it relates to the building, you can see the Clinton Street site, which is the proposed new location for the school. You have the existing site, and then you have Memorial Field, and you have the high school. So they're all probably within a I think you have the circumference radius that shows distance-wise. One other thing that would note as we're planning this project is to try, for my neighbor friends on Mandevilla, is to try to get the sidewalk all the way to Mandevilla, which right now ends at a four-way intersection at Langley. So that's just to show you the overlap. And this right now shows the outline of the site along with the wetlands that are contained in there. So even though that property is about 37.96 acres, not every piece of that is buildable. So here is one of the options that's been presented to the district as far as, and was shown at the recent Capital Facilities Committee meeting. So to orient yourself, this is Clinton Street. This would be for the neighbors on Mandevilla. This would be Mandevilla. This would be Birch down here next to Community Gardens. We're not touching the Community Gardens. That is owned by the state. And this would be Langley Parkway. So we kind of just took what you saw and put it on its side. You see parking. You see the new middle school with access, fields, and the existing fields that are there in this proposal would stay there. So that's one option. If we were to partner with the Y, this would be where the Y would go, where the school would go, and we're parking and parking. Now we get into the layout of the school. Is that what you
Yeah,
want?
that team is good.
That's team, okay. I've done my piece and then I'll come back for the finances if they want to hear about that.
So it's really early in sort of development of any floor plans for this building. We've been talking about a lot of concepts and putting together lots of different ideas. And we're interested to hear your feedback on what you see tonight. One of the concepts that we've been looking at with the school is creating a Main Street idea. And the Main Street would basically start off at the main entrance and connect all of the big public spaces within the school. So the auditorium, the gymnasium, in this case there's a little courtyard in the center of the school, and then out to the cafeteria. And then because the site it opens up to a really nice wooded area in the back, you imagine that that Main Street might connect out to an outside space. The admin is also along that Main Street, and then because we're trying to conserve a lot of space on the site to put in fields and other things that we need, it would probably be a 2 or 3 story building. So on the upper level of the Main Street, we're showing an upper level of the auditorium, a multi-purpose room for PE activities, and then in this case, the media center is in the back. Another concept that we've been talking about too, you heard Paulette talk about it, is this team concept. You know, how middle school teams work together and how we can situate them so that they're all in a neighborhood. So like the superintendent said, we're trying to make the school feel smaller. It's a big school, we're making neighborhoods for them. So this is a concept that shows the 3 teams for each grade level, and they would share sort of a project area in the middle, and they would also be connected to an outdoor learning space. Outdoor learning was something that we heard a lot of when we did the visioning sessions, and so this is a beautiful site for this to happen. So there's lots of different areas that you could have hardscaping, like outside of the cafeteria, we could imagine there'd be outdoor dining possibly out there. There might be work yards next to the tech and the career spaces, and then again, outdoor learning next to each of the pods. And then even up on the upper level, we have the art rooms right now up there. These things are going to move around, but we thought, you know, that would be a great place for a roof deck so that the art classes could go outside and enjoy outdoor space. Same thing for the media center. Right now they have a great little courtyard that they use back there, and so we're imagining that that would carry over into the new building as well. And then we're back to Jack.
Okay, it's also been asked about the financial impact of this. So this is at a very high, simple level, and this is based on the 2017 visioning session that was done in this building in March. So in 2017, there was a building design based on community feedback of what they wanted to see in the new middle school. And the square footage of that building was $194,076, okay? Current building is up about $165,000. The estimated cost at that time in 2017 was $75.8 million. The additional tax impact on what you pay now for debt service for the facilities would have been a $375 increase on the average home, which the average home in Concord is $322,005. That would be the additional impact. Okay? That in 2017. In 2022, we took the same 2017, because there's been nothing done since, and mimicked that same thing. That same school is now $96 million based on inflation and what's needed. The amount of the impact is $365. And the reason for that difference, or why that is, because we've had 6 years of debt that's been paid down, and interest rates are a little higher. And I apologize, this is based on a $250,000 home. This one's based on $332,000. Now, what we don't know is what the design work that's been done so far. The only thing we do know that's the new building is being designed for $900, not $1,200. As you can see here, it was designed for $1,200. We don't know what the base square footage is going to be. We don't know what the total base square footage is going to be yet. And we don't know what the total cost is going to be. That is an estimate that the board will get in June, and we will provide what that impact will be. The thing this does not include is, again, that work that was done, if there's building aid, and the use of the Facilities and Renovation Trust Fund, because the board has been saving for the last 10 years for this project. And that fund has almost $10 million in it come next June. And that will be used to offset the impact on the tax rate.
Another question that we've received on a number of occasions is, what's the timeline? Where do you see yourself? Where will you be? I think this pretty much shows where we are. And you can see we are really in the beginning stages of this project. Back in 2017 is when they did all of the charrettes and the groups with the community. And now we're at 2022, and you can see we're just beginning to put together what this school might look like. That's why these meetings are so important to hear from you. We do know that should we go forward on July 1st, an application must be received by the New Hampshire Department of Education, and it's a very it's a rigorous application. It's all done on a point system. We would be competing against other districts who submitted their proposals, but Concord is eligible for 40% reimbursement from the state, so it's critical that our application is A+, to use a school term, and it's to be able to justify to the Department of Ed and all the folks that review that that plan will provide the best opportunity for our youngsters. So July 1st is a really critical date for us, and that would be our plan. After that, we can continue with the planning. We know that we will design and plan. There'll be a process for bidding and going out for bids. That'll all occur in 23, 24, and we anticipate construction between 24 and 26. And in the fall of 26, we would open a new building for our students, our 900 students in middle school. So that's kind of the timeline and where we think we're headed. But as you know, anything can change at any moment. So this is what we think it will look like today. I want to remind you that we do, if you had some friends or neighbors that missed tonight and weren't able to be here, one, the meeting is recorded. You can see our friends from Concord TV are here. Thank you very much. And this video will be placed on our website so people can see this. We will also have a meeting on the 5th, which we will do a Zoom meeting for those folks that have trouble getting out, whether it's having little kids at home or whatever the issues are, just getting home from work. And so we'll do this presentation on May 5th, and we'll do a Zoom meeting at 5:30. And we'll send out a link in my next newsletter to the communities. I think that about brings us to the end, and I want to open it up. went a little bit longer than we anticipated in terms of this presentation, but this gives us a chance to have you give us some feedback. Hopefully we can answer some questions that are burning questions for you. I want to remind you that should there be questions, sometimes you leave a meeting and you say, why didn't I ask that? And please use the Concord website and submit your questions to us. I think that we constantly look at that, and we'll get those questions and answer them for you. So you feel free to send in any questions to us. So I'll open it up and try to facilitate some discussion. I'll be pointing to some people who may be able to answer your questions. And frankly, there may be some questions we can't answer. We're just not there yet. You can see we're in the beginning stages. We're really in the infancy of this project. But we'll do our best. Yes, please.
Can you explain why the center point area is preferred over this location or the field, and or what would then happen to this building?
Those are great.
Superintendent, can you repeat the question so the people on,
Right.
On the video will be able to hear it?
Yeah, the question was, why is the center point piece on Clinton Street a better site for the building rather than this site? The second part of that question was,
What would happen to this
what
building?
would happen to this particular school?
One of the concerns I have is the walkability, where, this is really in the neighborhood and there's so many people that.
Right. Well, I think you saw in one of the slides, Safe Routes to School would be available to us via that and building sidewalks. As you know, the federal government have that now in infrastructure, so there'll be new safe schools, walking paths, that kind of thing. So we'll certainly take advantage of that. So there will be ability to do that. But I want to answer your questions. This site is about 11 acres. The site out on Clinton Street is 37. Allows us a much larger area for the school, for parking, for play fields. As you know here, the parking is not good. Just the whole buses coming into this area, parents pick up, drop off. It's congested every day. You can sit out on the street by Abbott Downing and wait to get in here because there's no parking and there's no place really for drop off. So it's not a very conducive site for safety. That was one of the things that we looked at. In the case of the Clinton Street site, certainly the roadways into the site take people off the street, and a much more opportunity to create those driveways to be able to do that. So it's just the size of the site that made a difference, and the congestion that happens at this site. So I think that was one of the reasons why they did it. We don't know what we were going to do with this piece of property. There's been a lot of speculation about it, given the location of it. Certainly the board will take the opportunity to look and research and decide what the best use of this property is. And that is yet to be determined. Sir.
Yeah, as far as the walkability, first of all, I appreciate that you've added the 1.5 mile radius from the two parcels. However, Safe Routes to School for middle schoolers says 1 mile. And that's about 1,000 houses that will be knocked out of the walkable distance from Center Point. So I'm a little confused on that. And I think we kind of don't see anything in any of the prior materials on walkability. So it's fine to talk about Safe Routes to School, but that's a pretty busy road, Clinton Street, and you're building on a highway, and you're going to have to add lanes to accommodate the traffic. So I personally would like to see that better developed in the materials, a little more details as to what your assumptions are. We see great details as far as the pedagogical aspects, but we don't see a real development of, when you say renovate, are you just talking about replacing stuff, or are you talking about a combination of replacing stuff and putting in new construction? When you're talking about issues about it being more expensive to renovate than to build new, which I'm not clear that that was clear, but we don't really get much in your materials to explain what your assumptions are. And that the walkability is the case in point, right? Walkability never really showed up in the project materials until today. So,
Thank you. Thank you.
well,
I
no,
appreciate
maybe
your-
maybe
your-
the architects can suggest why it shows 1.5 miles versus 1 mile.
I think we were looking at busing distances.
Yeah, but, I mean, if we're talking safe routes to school, a mile is considered, for a middle schooler, a mile is considered about what they're gonna walk. 1.5 miles for high school kids.
Yeah, we were looking at two different things. So busing versus walkability. I mean, we have been talking about extending the sidewalk as well, so that there is a sidewalk that leads continuously, you know, from the current site to the new site.
But, you know, at this current site, people are on basically smaller roads, you're coming from many more directions and not on a heavily trafficked site. That's the point.
Okay, yeah, and my concern is on that site. I drove from Bow to work every day on Pleasant Street when there was no school at the center point. And school buses would stop, pick up kids, you couldn't get to school on time, get to work on time. That is a very congested road. I think adding a Y and the school there is gonna add more buses from both places, the Y to bring kids, people going in and out to swim or to do their gym activity at the Y. That's gonna be really congested, that road. And I don't see how you can say that kids are gonna walk on that particular road unless you're looking at a different walkability configuration. I don't think it's safe. I drove in icy roads all the way down from 89 down, and it was awful in the morning trying to get to work. And I just worked at the hospital, so I'm not driving very far. And the buses were stopping all the time, and picking up kids. You're behind the bus. You're trying to get to work. People are driving like mad people, and that's not good. And the other thing is, the one biggest thing that I have been going to all these meetings that have been put on by the school board, and nobody yet has addressed school enrollments. All the data that's on the school district site, nobody brings that up. Why is that? You have two sites to look at, data from 2006 to 2016, which shows grade levels dropping for that 10-year period. And now, you did another one that the school district paid for, the Davis report. How come that's never talked about in any of this when we're talking about building a brand new school during an inflationary time, 7% inflation? You don't think taxpayers are gonna get pretty pissed? I'm just thinking of taxpayers here. I love new schools. Granted, everybody wants new schools. But where is the data? I don't see that enrollment data discussed. I'm looking at the Davis report, and that shows 2019 data, school enrollments all the way through, K through, all the way through schools. And the data shows school enrollment dropping over the 5 to 10-year period all the way out to 2029, I believe. Where is that discussed? How come nobody talks about that ever at any of these things? Is this a want or a need or what? I'm not sure. I just would like to see somebody say, show me where the schools, kids coming in are going to be blowing up, and that we need this site, especially there on Clinton Street. I just don't see it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Roy?
Yes, I guess I consider this land decision to be sub-optimizing, and that means you're trying to minimize the expense of the land rather than considering the whole project. You're going to be spending $75 million or more on this new school. It's foolish to, try and keep the land cost down instead of spending, say, $2 million to get the right piece of land. So I think that you kind of just jumped over that whole step. you need to go back and look at some of this other stuff. You know, in the rounds of, you know, if we spent $2 million on land, could we get a piece more suitable for a school? And in particular, the first thing I heard about this from someone is, don't they realize that's the finest agricultural land in town? That's why we built the school. And, you know, somebody said, oh, it doesn't matter, it's gonna be developed anyway. And the answer is maybe and maybe not. It depends on whether the city wants to have some zoning to keep it. I'm not a member of Centerpoint. If I was a member of Centerpoint, I would be trying to sell a conservation easement on that property. So it's either farmed like stuff across the street, and maybe expand the public gardens onto it, for all these apartment houses they're building where they can't have stuff at home. So I think that, you know, in terms of, we shouldn't be building this thing on the prime agricultural land, and that probably goes for the White Farm across the street similarly.
Yeah.
And the second thing, the other gentleman talked about walkability, so I'm not going to say anything about it, but, you know, you people need to find it. You think we should preserve agricultural land? You believe we should, you know, have things to walk to instead of having to drive to. So, you know, that's the first part of that. The next thing is, we seem to be saying that being near houses is bad. You don't want to put this thing in a neighborhood. Well, I mean, now, I'm not in the real estate business. Everything I ever heard is being near a school increases your property value and not decreases it. And certainly the people that built all those houses out of broken ground, you know, knew or should have known that there was going to be more schools out there. And they may have bought that place specifically for that reason. And now to say you can't put a school out there because the people might not like it, I think, you know, maybe we need to find out, you know, do these people really oppose it or not oppose it? And once again, I don't see all this big secrecy in what the sites have been considered. You know, Mr. Dunn wants to look at a map and say, well, this particular part was suitable. You know, that's public information. You can perfectly well say, I looked at X site from a map and thought it might be suitable when you determined it wasn't. And that's not secret. So I think we need to, you know, step back and say, let's look at these sites correctly and see if this is really the best place for it before we spend a lot of money determining if we can build a school on it, which I didn't guess you could. And while I'm talking, I'll say one more thing about the architectural plan. It seemed to me that you've got kind of two opposite things here. Number one, you want everybody walking in the same entrance to security. But number two, you're trying to separate the clusters. And I know the previous plan, there was separate entrances at each grade level, so the kids wouldn't be missing all the time. You have these things like the gym and the auditorium, which in the past have been supposed to be available to the community. So having everybody walk in the same entrance, once you got to fix things up, instead of if you rent the gym, it has its own entrance, you can just go into the gym without getting involved with everybody else. So I mean, I think, yes, we have a need for security, but maybe with, you know, cameras and having somebody on site at each place if you're having a special event, that having a single entrance is not the panacea. It might be, but has its own problems. So anything.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other, go ahead, sir.
With regards to the walkability and distance,
Likability.
I didn't see the slide with the radius, with the circles drawn on it in this packet. But there's hardly anything in that radius, right? It's mostly White Farm, Memorial Field. What's missing are children, for the most part. I mean, yes, this proposed site is within about a mile of this present school. It's about a mile from there to Memorial Field. But the crucial thing is that this proposed site is a mile farther outside of the city, farther away from the student body. Rather than just drawing a circle on a map and saying, oh, well, everything's in or everything's out, what you really ought to do is to take a look at what is the actual driving distance or walking distance along roads. Because in most of that radius that you've drawn out there are no roads, right? It's large contiguous blocks of unwalkable or untraversable land. So instead, what you ought to do is, okay, well, how far is it for somebody to go along Clinton Street and then north along Fruit Street and then what have you? Or put differently, you know how much of your student body today is eligible for busing based on their address. What percentage of the school population for this proposed site would be eligible for busing? It seems to me that would be a relatively straightforward thing to do. And we could say, well, right now it's 75%. At this proposed site, it would be 90, 95% from all I can tell. I think that those are metrics that would be worthwhile for the community to have.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi. So this is my first time at a meeting, and also I'm originally from Florida, and we just moved here recently. And back in Florida, at the previous school that we were, when they were designing the school, they took certain things into account. And I just wanted to know, as far as like academics, and I don't think this is the appropriate time to ask this, but I'm going to ask it anyway, just because I don't know if I'm coming to another meeting. But as far as like academics, has there been maybe a group to talk about as far as like an international baccalaureate program or a STEAM, or if they want to have some type of engineering room or a maker space or anything like that? And as I said, I don't know if this is the right place to ask, but since you guys are in the brainstorming phases, maybe you can think about, well, you know, if we want the school to increase in enrollment and not have a lot of students go to private schools or whatever, maybe we want to implement an international baccalaureate program for middle school or a maker space in this area. That's all I wanted to say. And thank you for all your hard work. I know this, you guys have done a lot, and that's all I have. Bye.
Good question. You know, we didn't detail the drawings that were done, but it was a makerspace, a robotics lab, a STEAM lab. When I initially began discussion, we talked about large spaces so kids could do hands-on. We haven't talked about the International Baccalaureate, but we do have groups of teachers who have been working with us to help us and guide us in the programs that are, again, age appropriate. But you hit a number of the things that are in this building design. So as we continue with our brainstorming and hearing from everyone, then we'll continue to bring that information forward. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Sir.
On the walkability, I got about 4 points, but I'll just make a couple. Hearing that you're 75 days from a critical application on July 1st renders this whole meeting moot. I mean, there's deadlines every year for applying for that aid. We've got feasibility studies 5 years old. We've gone through COVID. We've gone through a lot of things, and I hate to say to go back to square one. But this is a community decision. You know, this school was built when I was 4 years old. I didn't live here. And so we're making a generational decision that's going to impact the middle school kids and their grandkids. So it needs to be a community decision. And so on the walkability issue, 15 years ago, I was a citizen activist, as I am now. There were school bus routes, and there were plots I saw, they're now confidential, I think for security reasons, where every student lived. And we used them actually for considering whether we would get votes there or not, whether there were families. But I'm sitting there saying, you know, has planning been done? You must have these maps to determine where the students are. I mean, this is, if you draw 93 and then maybe 393 or 93 in the river, we're in the southwest quadrant. We built schools in the 70s and 80s up on the heights. We consolidated them. We built one in Beaver Meadow. Willie Sutton used to rob banks, and they asked him why, because that's where the money is. Where should you build schools? Maybe you ought to build schools where the kids are. There's nobody down here. There's nobody down here. The other issue is that, and I'm not a parent, I don't have children. You know I've been involved with the Concord TV and the sports program, so I've made my commitment to schools, and I don't doubt one bit that the school needs to be replaced. But we've got kids up on the heights that if they stay for after school activity, you know, the heights grew an awful lot. Probably more than half the kids are on the heights now. So if they're going to stay for after school activities, if their parents don't have a car, how are they going to get home? Are they going to be deprived? Let's look to the kids. Are they going to be deprived of the opportunity for music, sports, and these other things? You know, there's fields up by the Millville School. There's fields up Keach Park. I mean, there's plenty of places. So walkability to a nearby sports field should not be a determination. You're going to have to bus more. I drive around and say, climate action now. So we're going to put a school in the southwest corner. The garages are up past the prison. We're going to drive over and pick them up. We're going to drive them here. We're going to drive them back. Any hopes for carbon plus, let alone carbon zero, goes out the window. So, I mean, you know, this community needs to be involved in the decision. The YMCA, you know, this city already supports a golf course that there's, I think, maybe 250 members, and there's people in this community that does it with the city council and the city administration, that maybe that's an extravagance. So now we're looking at establishing a relationship with the YMCA. A wonderful organization, lots of good people, and I understand some people wrote letters about being downtown. But if you're concerned about security, every person that goes to the YMCA, walks onto school grounds, has to have a background in a security check. When I volunteered with Concord TV, I had to run a security check. And I am familiar, I'm a practicing attorney for 45 years in town. More than once I've heard of incidents, and one client who was banned from the YMCA for inappropriate behavior. So do we want to open the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students to people, anybody that can walk on the grounds and say, well, I'm here for the YMCA? Seems to me that's the biggest issue. You know, if the YMCA wants to get out of downtown, let them buy this building. They got a gym. But I mean, there's some serious issues, and these are issues that have not been placed out there for discussion. I don't have the answers. I have the questions. These people have the answers, and you need to ask them. You don't need to say, in 2017 we had some charrettes, and oh yeah, but don't forget about COVID, and don't forget about homeschooling, and don't forget about some of these other issues. You know, you've got a junior high up in Merrimack Valley. If you did a perfect world starting from square one, you probably ought to say, maybe the students in the north part of Concord should really go to Merrimack Valley Middle School because it's a little closer. Oh, we can't do that because we're separate districts. Maybe we ought to do some things like that. But these are the questions that are not going to be answered in the next 75 days if you've got a deadline to get some financing in there. It should not be driven by financing and state aid. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Kathleen?
Yes.
I just think, just to respond to that point, 75 days is we have to put in an application that starts a 2 to 3 year process. It does not commit us to building a new school, does not commit the state to giving us money. It does not commit us to a design or the why. It allows, it's just the
Placeholder.
5th step in a process that has hundreds of steps. So that we can have these discussions about whether it should include a why, how it should be designed, things like that. But if we don't submit an application, we won't be eligible in 3 or 4 years for 40% of the cost.
And I think to Mr. Russell's point, it is a community dialogue, that's why we're having it. And understand also, it's a letter of intent, which is not binding with the why. There's a letter of intent with Center Point Church, which is not binding on the land. The board wanted to get this out into the community before making any firm commitments, to get the feedback, hence why this discussion.
Anybody else? Sir?
I just wanted to say the Main Street atrium that the architecture team has put together, I like it. That's all I'm going to say.
Thank you. Anybody else before we do second rounds? Sir, go ahead.
Do you have any numbers as to where,
The kids are.
I mean, I mess with the GIS a little bit to try and get some sense as to where our population density is. Do you have a sense as to where current and future student population for the Concord School District is?
Well, we're troubled by that a little bit, and let me tell you why. Obviously, the kids that come here are all over the city, so we know that. And if you look at all of our elementary schools and you look at the numbers there, they're all about the same, okay? So they're collecting students from their area. Their numbers run between 300 and 400 at each elementary school. So we know that across the district, that's, you know, they're spread out all over the city. that's number one. Number two is Jack and I meet regularly with the city manager, the business manager, and we talk about these issues. In the last meeting we had, they talked about all of the new building that is about to happen in this community. 172 workforce housing units. There's also 2 single-family development. And now we know that people aren't having 5 children, but we do know that out of some of those places come at least. Oh, I'm sorry, you have 6. Okay, you are our favorite family. I should have remembered that too from the last time. Is that 6 with 1 coming, or is that 5 with? Okay, all right. And so we know that based on the discussions that we've had with the city manager, that there's a number of housing developments happening in the community. And so, yes, the enrollment reports have shown a decline over the 10 years. I understand that. The focus of this building was to service between 850 and 900 students. We think that number is pretty steady over time. So it wasn't 1,200 like it was back in 2017. So we have addressed the enrollment. We have looked at that. But we are also concerned about what's going to happen in the city and the number of families. We just had a new family that I just received a call with 5 children in competition. But 5 kids are coming to our district who are currently in Merrimack Valley in a housing, but they're moving. They have found housing in Concord and they're coming. So we've had a number of families who are new Americans come. We've had family just recently from Egypt. We have one from Afghanistan and from the Congo. So we're seeing that rejuvenation of the wonderful diversity in our community. So I understand the whole piece with enrollment. I understand where the kids are coming from in terms of that. And it is location, but youngsters are spread all over the city.
Can you
We
share that?
do have, we do have buses. We know exactly where all the kids are because we obviously provide that transportation. I would ask you to come to Runlet at 7:30?
8:15.
Oh, yeah, you're the late start, sorry.
8:15.
If you come around 8:15, I'd love you to see how many children are not taking the bus, how many youngsters are being driven to school every day by their parents. I have no idea why we've seen that significant shift. I believe it has a lot to do with families being together in the morning. I also think it's around safety, that parents would rather bring them. So we see a tremendous amount of students, and by the way, that's across all schools, that we're seeing a lot of parent driving and less bus. As a matter of fact, we look at buses to see if we can reduce them. And I hope that our carbon footprint someday, Mr. Russell, will be gone when we have electric buses. So we'll just wait for that to happen.
Still energy.
That's true.
Kathleen, I think one of the reasons we're seeing an increase in parents driving their kids is frankly because we asked them to.
Right.
We literally asked them to, in the midst of the pandemic, to please drive your kid. Because it helps with the buses, it helps with the spacing. And so I think people have gotten into that routine in the morning.
Yeah.
To be fair to all the parents that are out there that have really done yeoman's duty with driving their kids in the morning and rearranging their schedule so that they can do that, but that's now their routine. So I think that's why we're seeing more parent traffic, because we asked them to.
I think also a lot of it is a lot more people are working from home now. Companies aren't going back to having them come there, and so they're available to drive their kids now. I mean, like, if you're working from home, you don't have to commute however long. You can just drive the kids to school and go back and work. So some of that's not going to go away after COVID, because a lot of places you hear, they're talking about, I mean, I'm not one of them. I've had to work through the whole thing, but, and so then that leads me to like another thing, because this is maybe embarrassing to say, but I lived in Concord for like 11 years at the time, and I didn't know when my kid wanted to do Parks and Rec basketball this couple months ago, I was like, I don't even know where I knew where the high school was because you have to pass it to go to the hospital. But other than that, I'm like, I didn't know where Runlet was. I didn't know where Abbott Downing was. I didn't know where Krista McAuliffe, because this is a part of town that all that time that I've lived in Concord, I do everything in my life not in this part of town. So to have all the schools here, it just seems like, not all the schools, like I know there are schools other, but for like the big ones, like he's saying, my kids went through like Millbrook and Broken Ground and stuff like that, and a huge portion of those kids, their families don't have transportation. Even when we would have events at the school, the PTA would pay for buses so that parents could come and attend things. So we can't like count on those kids necessarily having a way to stay after school or do anything at the school if it's too far.
Just so you know,
Right,
we
have
have
an
late
opportunity.
buses.
Yeah, right.
We have after-school programs. Kids are here till 6 o'clock, and we are running buses all over the city.
We're not in the school yet.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I just want you to know that kids do have, whether they're at Broken Ground, Millbrook,
Yeah.
or here, the kids can stay here. The Y runs the programs here. And so the kids have transportation home.
I just was speaking to like where he was saying like where the kids are now, and like these housing things that they're building. I don't know where in town they're gonna be.
They happen to be building
Are they
some
like
of them in the
down
south
here,
end.
or
Yeah,
that's what I'm
yeah,
saying. I don't know
yeah.
where they're building them,
Yeah.
but
The biggest complex is in the south end. Just trying to make sure everybody has a voice, so go ahead.
Okay,
Yeah.
this will be quick. The first question is to the woman from the Y, the CEO.
Ms. Shepherd?
Yeah, CEO. So Walkability downtown Concord, for those kids that go to the after school, they walk from all over, and I'm a Y member. I've been a Y member for like most of my life. And I wonder about that. Have you looked at asking parents at the Y or members of the Y whether they like the downtown area for their kids? You know, the middle school kids that can walk, because I see them walking from all over to get to play basketball and all that, because I support that all the time. And so that's one question. Are you looking at the, for those kids that don't have transportation, they walk from wherever they are downtown, they go to the Y after school, and I love it. I see them all the time because I'm riding my bike all over. The other question is to Mrs. Murphy. I have an article from The Patch. It was dated March 16th, 2022, posted that day. And in it, it states that when the elementary schools were consolidated, okay, the taxpayers were promised repeatedly by school board members and administrators at the time they would not have to pay for any new building construction until after the elementary school consolidation debt was paid off through 2041. And you had stated or said to the person that enrollment would be flat for the next decade, even though the city has hundreds of new housing units expected during the next 3 to 5 years, almost all in SAU 8. So I'm just pretty much just putting that out there. I think people need to hear that.
Well, I'll speak to the finances because it's important, because I was on the board at that time. And that planning for that, the debt for that will be paid off in 2041. And we're the very last ones to get building in. And I remember being told by the director at the time for the state that if we didn't get in line, we were going to miss the boat. The original plan was to consolidate, and that was to be a 10-year project. And what we didn't want to see as a board at the time, because I was a board member, is kids in perpetual construction. And the other comment that was made multiple times after was, that's great you're doing the elementary school, when you're doing Runlet. That was made clear to us. But what we did was we did all three at one time, which was probably one of the largest public construction projects in the state at the time. We saved $7.5 million because of the time that we built, and had no additional tax impact from that project. We have been in a state of savings since 2013, 2014, hence why there is $10 million. All Concord taxpayers, 5% of their tax rate goes towards debt service, regardless of what our debt is. So when we're in savings mode, we put money away. When it goes above, like when we built the elementary schools, we pulled down. And that is the way that structure works, so that we don't impact taxpayers. But to say we're not going to do anything until 2041 is just not, I don't think, factually accurate. That's all. If he stated it, he stated it. That may have been his opinion, but that's one thing.
I don't think it
So,
was,
but
that's
okay.
my opinion.
It's just, with over 1 million square feet, it's difficult to maintain when you got 4,500 little feet running through
Right, but
these
the
buildings.
enrollments are going, projected enrollments going down, and apparently in this article, Ms. Murphy agreed.
Yep, and
I'm just saying.
Yep, and we,
Okay.
well, and I think we should address it because it's a community conversation.
Yes.
But understand too,
Enrollment.
when we did the Davis demographics report in 2019, I think in February 2019, that was delivered. And what it was based on is 5 years is the most accurate. Because why? The babies are born. The extra 5 are going to be, statistics are added to it to determine, okay, what's 10 years look like. Also at the time, there was no major projects in the city. None. No major housing developments, nothing. Now we're talking about 2, potentially 3 significant ones. But is our outflow more than our inflow? That's the question. Right before we did this, I had called Lauren, who did that study, and he said, post-COVID, it's not worth doing at this point in time. But since you're having significant increases in construction, let's see what it looks like maybe in a year. Hence, why everything's a letter of intent, and we're having this community conversation.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Just a comment about the enrollment. In 2026, when we intend to open a building, the enrollment projections for Davis was 869. So we're right in the ballpark in terms of the building. But I do want to make a point that this wasn't based on enrollment. It was based on the need of the building and the structure. I understand you're concerned about enrollment, and we certainly will watch that. But the work that we're doing is not because of the enrollment. It's because this building does not service our students, our middle school students. And that's the reason that the board charged charged us to begin to do this work. So just, I don't want to belabor that point, but sir.
I was just wondering, in terms of a transportation question, there's been a lot of talk about school buses, but the city of Concord, for its size, in my opinion, has a fairly extensive public bus network. And I didn't know if there's any talk about partnering or extending, because I know right now it turns up Fruit Street. So if it was able to extend, and for anybody that's curious, the bus is free currently, which is kind of nice if you don't have a car. So yeah, I didn't know if you could address that.
Great point. When I visited the teachers here, we were talking about the project with the teachers, and we've had a lot of meetings with them. One of the questions was, will the bus service, the city bus service, be able to provide service to the school? And so we've contacted them. We're in discussions with them on that very point. So, great point.
What about electric buses, Kathleen?
I know, Jonathan. I hope we see that someday.
The infrastructure bill has funding, hopefully, in it for electric school buses for districts, so.
What? Go ahead, ma'am.
Yes, I just have one question, comment, and it's not in regards to where the school is located, but looking at the plan as it's designed for the school, I noticed that you have, I know it's not going to be a wing, but a cluster of your special education services all together, as opposed to dispersed, so that your special education students are more integrated into the school.
Right, no, that's a great point. I just want to bring that that slide up. I'm not sure where you're looking.
It's the orange above the green
this right here.
courtyard, and you see that all of your special education services are clustered on, I'm going to call it a wing. I realize it's not a wing.
Right,
But
is this what you're talking about?
Yes.
Well, we have OTPT, which is just a service, an inclusion room and a room for autism, but we have special ed classrooms throughout the whole project.
Dispersed, right.
They're all spread out, like here's our program for, the 3R program for students with emotional needs. All of the teams will have a special ed area for learning disabilities and developmental disability issues. So, but we did bring some of, whoops, I'm on a different, but we did put some of the, like OTPT, which is in and out, the autism program. We did put those next to each other, but we didn't put all of them together, because you're absolutely right. Our students should be integrated throughout the building. And the district has always been big supporters of inclusion. Sir, I know why.
So looking at the possible layout here of the site, I know that this is state forest land basically on 3 sides of this plot, but is there any possibility of getting maybe a walking path from here south to Ironworks Road? It might be a way of having parents do drop-off. They drop off here on the path, they go on, parents drive further on. The second point related to access is there's, as far as I can see, I see that there is one road that's marked as service for deliveries and what have you, but here at the intersection with Langley, that looks like the one and only way in or out of this campus. Is that from an emergency response perspective, from a security perspective, is that best practice, or do we need to consider some other way of getting some response in there?
So we've been talking about that, and it's a great point. You always want to have 2 ways into a site, just in case one is blocked for emergency egress. So I think that will have to be a conversation with the city and planning and talking about, you know, how we get most of the traffic in and out. There may be a signal at that 4-way intersection, so they might prefer to have people, for the most part, coming in and out that way. But then we could label another road as secondary, and it could be for emergency egress, could be for service, could be for other things.
When Queen Street belongs and is serviced by the city, it's not state-owned or anything like that?
It's mixed between the city and the state.
Great.
Yeah.
That's going to make things...
Well, we thought it was double the fund, so that's why we're interested. But to your points are about the paths and walking paths, it's conversations we're having with the city. We know there's unauthorized trails through there. They built a bridge, which we didn't know until our discussion, over Langley for the bears to go through. But they also have cross-country skiing all through White Farm and all. And we've talked about how can we integrate all that into this new potential place.
Yeah, I was going to ask about traffic studies. You know, I've been around town for a while. I've gotten stuck in McKee Square, which is a knot. I've gotten stuck by the high school. I've gotten stuck over by the hospital. We built Langley Highway, a Langley Parkway, so that people could get out of town coming from the south or 89 could come in Clinton Street and get over there. But it seems to me you're throwing another knot in there by citing it there, and seems to me you need to be doing some sort of traffic study. That needs to be a real consideration. You know, with COVID and people working from home, things and school being hybrid or whatever, it was a little alleviated, but and the times I've gone out Clinton Street not very often in the morning, I'm amazed at the number of cars coming in that way. So the other issue is dozen or so years ago, we had a big citywide study, 2020, and that talked about projection of growth. And I think, and I've not heard an awful lot whether those things panned out or not, but it seemed to me that the northeast sector, east of 93 and the river and north of 393 were going to be the big growth areas as well. And there's state population projections, there's federal population projections, and when I asked the superintendent back around 2008, when we were doing the school consolidation, I said, did you consult those? And she said, well, where do you get them? So they obviously weren't consulted. So I would hope the school district is factoring these things in. The other issue on growth is, and you can probably tell I was a major in math and in college. 1968 was the peak year. I got out of school the year before that. That was a peak year for baby boomers graduating. 1980, you can go to the Concord Public Library in the Concord room. There's a study where the Concord School District saying, well, things are down. They wanted to close the school that Dave Parker owns out there by St. Paul's, which they did. They wanted to close the current school headquarters, and they wanted to close the one over there in East Concord that has since been closed. And then in 1998, guess what? The baby boomers had kids, and we had another peak year in 1998. And so it seems to me that, you know, to the extent we're at a low point, they're going to grow. We've built 6-lane highway to South Manchester, and they're talking about bringing it more. So somebody told me, you've moved the Mass State line to South Manchester, you know, and so basically we're going to grow, and to the extent that you need to sit there and look at these population projections. But I mean, this is how you go about making these type of decisions, and you know, when they're not considered, then you know, it's a surprise, and it costs more money to cure it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else, as we wrap up? We sort of indicated we would give it about an hour and a half, and again, I want to encourage everyone to share this information. It will be on Concord TV, and anyone who was not able to make it, we're going to repeat this, only we're going to do it online and through a Zoom. I'll get a link out to you, and that's on May 5th at 5:30. Any closing thoughts before we give the last? Anybody? President Richards, any thoughts?
No, I just want to thank everybody for their comments and for being so forthright, and posing your questions, and for coming out here and participating. We really appreciate it. We need your input, and we hope you continue to participate and provide your input as we go through this project. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.